What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Show, where I, Graham G. S. Matthews, break down all the original content you watch on the WWE Network, on Peacock, and on Vice, as today we're talking Season 4, Episode 4 of Dark Side of the Ring, entitled What Happened to Doink the Clown. I wasn't exactly sure what to expect from this episode. I guess I say that about most episodes, in that I didn't know much about the life of Matt Bourne, the original person behind Doink the Clown back in 1993. I knew that he died 10 years ago, and the timing of this episode, I don't think they did this intentionally. Had they honestly done this on this coming week and not this week, it would have fallen almost exactly on the 10-year anniversary of when he died. So I'm recording this on June 25th. This aired on the 20th. Had it aired on Tuesday of this week, the 27th, it literally would have been almost exactly to the day 10 years from when he died. The OCD in me would have wanted it to air that day, but regardless, still pretty close to the 10-year anniversary of his death. I didn't know much about his life beyond the ring. I knew he got fired, and there were other people that played Doink after him. But this episode really shined a pretty big light on what his life was like beyond the ring, the issues he faced with alcohol and drugs, and kind of the really sad story behind his death. And we heard from a lot of his family members here, his ex-wives, his daughter, among other people he was close with, B. Brian Blair. Mick Foley was on this episode quite a bit, which was cool to see. Hacksaw Jim Duggan was someone that he crossed paths with on a number of occasions throughout his career, so we heard from him, and we heard from him a decent amount as well. So they open up the episode with some footage of Matt Bourne, the original Doink the Clown, and this episode is all about, facing Ricky Steamboat at the first ever WrestleMania. And they kind of test his daughter, Tegan. How old she is now, I'm not sure, probably late 20s, early 30s. So she's not a kid by any means. But she goes, Ricky was fine, but my dad was amazing. Like, he was the best part of that match. And I'm like, okay. Well, I haven't seen the match in a long time, but I'm just thinking, like, that's pretty funny to think that, she thinks her dad is this incredible performer, and Ricky Steamboat, he's like, yeah, he's okay. It was just funny how she talked about Ricky Steamboat. But she was so proud of her father's performance on that show. We hear from Michelle James, who was married to Matt from 1993 through 2004. And she met him when she was 21 years old and he was 37. So he grew up with his dad, and his mom basically said the last memory that he has of his mom is that she did not want to be near that bastard anymore. That's what she called Matt. So he had a lot of animosity towards his biological mother, so he had a pretty rough upbringing even from that point. So we grew up with his dad, who was also a performer. Tough Tony Bourne, I'm pretty sure was his name. Foley says Matt was pretty solid in the ring. He wrestled across all the territories. Hacksaw Jim Duggan talks being paired with him at one point. B. Brian Blair recalls meeting him and how they got in a fight at a bar because Matt wanted to prove that he was the toughest person in the room by accusing Blair of flirting with his woman, even though he wasn't. So they got in a massive fight, and Brian actually got the better of Matt and beat the shit out of him, bit his lip off, he said. And Ivan Koloff, who we heard from on the last episode, actually had to interject and helped Brian from getting his eyeball ripped out by Matt because he was completely drunk and just out of control. So he credits Koloff for helping him not go blind and not having his eyeball ripped out by Matt Bourne. So we hear from we don't hear from Matt. We hear some audio clips of him from, 2010, or I might be mistaking that with the Graham audio quotes from last week that were also from 2010 before he died. I think either that same year or soon after or whatever. But anyway, in working for a promotion, he was actually fired after kicking a fan so hard on the outside their eyeball popped out. Now, I assume that's true, but I'm a little weary after we heard so many stories on Tales from the Territories that were not true about people ripping other people's eyeballs out. So I tend to believe that because it came from a couple different accounts, but we heard a lot of stories like that on Tales from the Territories that were very greatly exaggerated from what I found out after the fact, after talking about it here on the show, from other people. But anyway, so he was hired by WCW at one point as Big Josh, like a lumberjack-type wrestler. We heard from his first ex-wife, Maria, who was married to him from 1991 through 1993, so not a very long time. She recalls meeting him. I don't think she was in the business, but she recalled meeting him, I think, when he was in WCW. And he was not an amazing father in the sense that the producer asked her, where was he and what was going through his mind when you had the kid. And Maria mentions, well, he didn't show up until right before our daughter was born. So, not exactly winning any Father of the Year awards. Now, I thought that she was the daughter of Michelle. That when Tegan, like I mentioned earlier, she was all over this episode. I thought she was Michelle's daughter. Maybe not. Maybe she's Maria's daughter, and she just lived with Michelle. I kind of got that confused. I guess if I looked at the last name, I could probably figure that out, but I just remember her name was Tegan. I forgot her last name, but it doesn't really matter. So soon after getting fired from that indie promotion, he got hired by WWF. And they said it was a joint effort and that it was both him and Vince that came up with the Doink the Clown character. Krusty from The Simpsons was an inspiration. We see a couple clips of Krusty throughout this episode. And he made the gimmick work. It was something that should not have worked. And Foley even said, I hated a lot of what WWE was doing at that point because this was before he arrived there. But he thought what Matt Bourne was doing his Doink was great because he really made it his own. He was a great heel Doink. So he got joined by a second Doink at WrestleMania 9. And the daughter said she loved it. She called it amazing. But we hear from Michelle, who says, he thought that Vince, by doing that, was setting him up to fail. Now, I don't know if she means with the character or with this specific incident where a second Doink showed up and, he was paranoid that they were getting rid of him, which they ended up doing. So, I'm not exactly sure what she was referring to, but he was fired soon after for drug abuse. Later on in 93, either early 94 or late 93, he was not in WWE for very long. He got fired for drug abuse. And Maria ended up believing him his first wife after he drank more and more and did cocaine, she said. He even threw cigarettes at her while she had their daughter in her arms. And she's like, I can't take this shit anymore. I got to get out of here. And Maria left with her daughter pretty much that moment. And they talked about how Matt had a massive fucking drug issue. He did cocaine 8 days straight. They said that he was replaced in WWE by Ray Apollo, among others. Steve Kern portrayed Doink at one point. It was Ray Apollo, Steve Kern. I know Steve Lombardi. Isn't that his name, Steve Lombardi, the Brooklyn Brawler? He portrayed Doink in the last decade plus in the random appearances he would make in WWE. Matt Bourne never went back, I don't think, because he was just so fucked up and shit. There might have been one other person, but I know those were the three main people that did Doink after Matt Bourne was gone. And we hear from Michelle, who said that, Matt did not have her work because he was like a millionaire at that point coming off his WWE stint. He paid all the bills. He did all that stuff. He was, I guess, responsible in that sense. He got into an altercation with one of her ex-boyfriends at a bar and he went to jail. He ripped the sink off of the jail cell. It was a pretty serious incident. He got very drunk, very jealous, and he wouldn't remember it the next day. He would apologize profusely, but not remember the incident because he just got so fucking hammered. He ended up returning to wrestling, they said, but he can only really go as Doink because people didn't want Big Josh. They didn't want fucking Matt Bourne. They wanted Doink the Clown. That was the character everyone knew him as. Something I completely forgot about, he actually went to ECW at one point. The fans completely hated it because they thought the gimmick sucked and it just didn't fit in that version of ECW. But then he did a makeover and did a Reborn Again gimmick. It was called Born Again. His real last name is Matt Bourne, obviously. So I thought that was actually pretty clever. I don't know much about that stint in ECW that he had, but that's a pretty cool gimmick where he was like half clown, half himself. That's pretty sick, actually. They talked about how Vince owned the trademark, and he obviously still must because they had the character come out on TV, right before he died. Matt Bourne died, and he's been in the video games the last couple of years. So WWE clearly still owns the trademark, even though he was going as Doink the Clown in the Indies. I guess Vince just had to send him residuals because he wasn't doing that originally. So they got in a big battle over that, and he ended up having to send Matt Bourne residuals when they would still use his likeness in WWE. I don't know if the family sees a dime from, I don't know how much money they'd be making off of it, but Doink the Clown being in WWE 2K23, do they make any money off that? I mean, probably not, but he has been in the games the last couple of years, so it just kind of makes me wonder, does anyone get money for that? Does anyone get paid for that? I'm not sure. But anyway, so they talk about that. Michelle said that she had 2 kids with Matt. They had 2 kids together. And I guess he pretty badly beat her up, she talked about, over an incident where he accused her of cheating on him, and she wasn't. She'd be upstairs putting the kids to bed. She would come downstairs, and he would ask, where were you? And, beat her up. It was some pretty serious stuff. Spoiler alert, she did not end up leaving him after that. She eventually did leave him. I don't think it was after that incident that she left him, because she explained why she didn't leave him. She did end up leaving with the kids soon after, because it got just to a point where she couldn't deal with that shit anymore. And we hear from Hacksaw or Foley or one of the two. I think it was Foley or actually it was Michelle. She said Match has never let anything go. And that kind of led into an incident. That was the whole segue into an incident that he had at a house show. Not a house show, but an indie show in 2010. I think in New Jersey or something, where he dressed up as Doink. Pretty fucking sad. He had the whole get-up up, and he had a match with Hacksaw. And Hacksaw tells this story about how he actually tried to low blow legitimately Hacksaw during the match. And Hacksaw was like, do you want a shirt or do you want to shoot or do you want to work? Like, what the fuck's going on here? And he ended up, because he wanted to do a spot where, like, Hacksaw pulled out the 2x4 and then Doink pulled out a chair and they were going to, like, fight with it and it was going to be legit. And Hacksaw's like, we're wrestling in front of 100 people. I'm not doing that shit. And then he took that seriously, wanted to do it anyway, ran off and never came back. It was pretty fucking bad. So they talk about how Matt met Connie Cook in 2011, and they were only together for a few years before he died. But he said that, she said rather, that he took care of her mom, who was not doing well and was on medication. And he dies in June 2013. And Tegan, the daughter, thinks that Connie is responsible. I think she thinks not only is she responsible, she thinks that she legitimately killed him, that she murdered him. It's not a case where she thought that it was... She thought there was foul play. It's not like, she neglected him. And, I mean, according to the police report, it gets pretty fucking wild there. This is all the stuff I did not know about. According to the police report, he wasn't feeling well, and he stole all the mom's drugs, and Bourne actually called Tegan, she said, the day before, saying that he was planning on leaving Connie. He just couldn't deal with her anymore, just didn't like her, whatever. And whatever you do, don't blame her for it, or something weird like that. And he called Michelle and told her the same thing, I guess. Connie recalls him moaning and taking the mom's drugs, passed outside of the apartment, passed out outside, and heard him snoring all night, not thinking anything was out of the ordinary. She woke up early in the morning, saw him probably choking on his own vomit, essentially, is what she described, wiped it up, called her friend, and then went back to bed and did not call the police or the hospital until 9 o'clock, until it was too late. So, she didn't think in that moment that he overdosed, which is exactly what happened. So she denies actually going back to bed. So again, if Tegan thought, all right, she's responsible because she was a fucking idiot, why would she go back to bed? That's one thing. Because she denies all that here. I'm surprised she even actually appeared to come on camera to talk about it, but she seems like not the brightest bulb in the closet, to be perfectly honest. No, Tegan thinks that she flat out fucking killed her and that she put shit in his drink and that she actually wanted to kill him and that she did it on purpose. Which just, he had a pretty bad, drug addiction among other issues even at that point, it seemed like. So it's pretty crazy to think that she would think that actually happened, but whatever. So officially on the coroner's report, he died of an overdose and an enlarged heart. It was 6 times the normal size because of drug abuse. That kind of tells the story right there. I don't think she killed him, Connie, that is. I think that's just kind of denying her father's just abhorrent behavior, among other stuff. So, anyway, Tegan still thinks there was foul play. They recall going to the funeral and how emotional an experience that was. Tegan talks about struggling with depression after the passing of her father and relating to what he was going through, feeling like, she lost a lot of friends and she could have taken drugs because it just can't get much worse and all this other shit, and she understands where he was in his life at that point. Mick Foley talks his legacy as a character, as a person. He really did open up when he was insanely drunk. He would open up about being an absentee dad and how that really bothered him. Michelle said that she wants him to be remembered as a great dad. And Tegan thinks that they're a lot alike all these years later, having, being an adult now and understanding where he was coming from. They had a really tough relationship, and she understands why he was like that now and feels that they're a lot alike, and she shows off the tattoo that she has of him on her arm. It's a pretty heavy episode. Again, I did not expect it to go the direction that it did. I did not know any of that as far as how he died. I knew when he died, I just didn't know how, and beyond the drug abuse stuff and whatever, I knew he wasn't in a good way. But the details they divulged here were pretty fucking serious and pretty wild stuff. So this was a crazy episode. Again, I hate saying I enjoy these episodes because they're dealing with pretty dark subject matter. But it was very informative, again. It was very informative. I don't know if everything they said was completely accurate. It seems like there are a couple inaccuracies here and there when it comes to this sort of stuff. But overall, it painted a pretty accurate picture from what it sounded like of Matt Bourne and all of his issues and the person that he was and the person that he wasn't at times, the performer he was and the character that he created and all this other sort of stuff. So, interesting episode to say the least, what happened to Doink the Clown. I think we have a bit of a lighter episode next week with Junkyard Dog. I know he had a pretty bad death. I don't know about his life before that, though, like if he was a bad person, what other issues he had. They'll talk about it next week here on the show, so I'm interested to see how that goes. But this was a solid edition, if nothing else, of Dark Side of the Ring on Doink the Clown. Check it out when you get a chance on Vice TV to see it for yourself. Thank you guys for checking out my review of the show. I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, and share the video. All that stuff is greatly appreciated. Check out all my other Dark Side of the Ring reviews down below in the playlist and the description box. I would appreciate that as well. Have a great one, folks. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.